Welcome to the Builders of Authority podcast, a show committed to helping you build authority for your brand. In the realm of business and personal branding, authority stands as a cornerstone. Authority isn't built overnight, it's built over time. So join us as we build something remarkable together. And now, here's your host, Adam McChesney.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Builders of Authority podcast. Quick reminder before we hop into today's episode that we are continuing to grow our Builders of Authority community online. Today's guest is actually a member of the community, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Builders of Authority is committed to helping you become the authority in your industry with personal branding. We have our free Facebook group that you can join by typing in Builders of Authority into the search bar. And in that group, there's daily content, weekly live trainings, and much more. We have our Builders of Authority Mastermind, which includes a private Facebook group, 3 live weekly trainings and sessions, access to our personal branding course, and more. We have one-to-one personal branding coaching and consulting also available. Reach out to us at buildauthority.co or send me a DM on social media and let's have a conversation. Today, we have another in-person episode lined up for you. Super excited about today's guest. This is someone that, to be honest, has made a massive impact on who I am today, specifically around things like Builders of Authority. And he probably knows a little bit about it, but probably not the full circle. I've been coaching and helping people with their personal brands and businesses long before I ever officially started and launched Builders of Authority. And so often I would offer help to people, and those people would look at what I've done and make every excuse in the book as to why it was too much, too complicated, and why they didn't want to do it. Not today's guest. And today's guest has gone through an incredible journey with plenty of ups and downs and challenges, and he could have made every excuse in the book at every step in his journey, but he's resilient. And for that, I can't thank him enough. He's a member of our BOA Mastermind and one of my one-to-one inner circle coaching clients. My guest today is Brad Starnes. He is the owner of Screamin Marketing Group and the host of the Unfair Advantage podcast. Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey Adam, thanks for having me on. And it's you say that I've made a huge impact on you, but the fact is that you've made an even bigger impact on me, and I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for you and this program and everything like that. So
thanks, man. And that's why I do what I do. It's I mean, a little bit about what I'm going on, but like this is the stuff that lights me up and is why I'm really focused on going all in on what Builders of Authority is and things like that. But let's dive into you, man.
Yeah.
I know you got a journey on the entrepreneurial space from what your previous business was and things like that. So give us a little bit of background on kind of where you got started in the entrepreneurial space and where you're at right now.
Yeah. Like everybody else, I kind of began my entrepreneurial journey like back when I was, 5, 6, 7, 8. I remember seeing a infomercial on TV of like, you could turn in your idea and it'd get they'd file a patent for you. So I submitted this idea for like a cleaning machine, and it was like this robot vacuum that would had all these arms and everything. It would clean everything. I was like, who is your ideal client? Well, it was my mom. She would buy everything. And that's kind of like the first thing that I remember being like early on as an entrepreneur, did everything in between from mowing lawns, all that. And I always freelance building websites on the side since I was like 14 or 15. Company I have now is actually my aunt's company long ago that she had to close down. And I went off to college in 2017, and while I was there, went through some issues with my roommates on how to share bills. It was like 1 month, I had the money, he had the money, or we were just busy, we forgot to pay each other, and it was like this huge pain in the ass. And so we decided to build an app that would essentially automate that whole process for you. We went and raised like $130,000 in capital, hired a team overseas in the Philippines, everything in between, and last about 18 months. And unfortunately, I didn't focus a lot on like the users and like what the customers actually wanted. And so we built a product that the users ultimately didn't want or need, and had to fold and close that company after 18 months.
So when you talk about that, because obviously like I had conversations with you and we knew each other like as you were going through that journey. When you take a look and you say that like you wasn't focused on like the user, the customer feedback and things like that, was it because there were things that the app just didn't have, or were things like Venmo and some of those other things just like taking a bigger precedent at that time? Because I think there was kind of like a crossover when that started being really popular as well.
It's actually a bridge between the two. So one of it was like we built an app that we had 15,000 billers on our platform. So your electric company, gas, water, rent, all that stuff. And so the idea was that it was a little bit more time up front, but then you didn't have to do anything afterwards.
Okay.
And so it's hard to change the way people like their behaviors and the way they do things. A lot of our product market research actually also came like right before the pandemic. And so then we were building during the first year of the pandemic in 2020. So everything that we thought was what people wanted
Completely
in 2019 was the case, but then it changed it, and we didn't stay in touch with our users as much as we should have. And we were also talking to the wrong users. So we would talk to the roommate who was the one who was always getting effed over by the bill not getting paid on time, like those different things. But we weren't talking to the roommates who were the ones who were taking advantage of it and loved the fact that they could be 4 days late on paying rent because the roommate was always the one, taking the punch. And
I was
and
that
being like,
roommate
yep.
in college, always paying for everybody. So
Yep.
I hear
So
ya.
it was both sides on there. Ultimately, when it came to the end, like we launched the app, we had a ton of like organic downloads. And what I found out was people were wanting a application where you could go to like a bar and swipe a card, and it would charge each person their individual portion. They didn't care about their rent and utilities. They cared more so about being able to go out with friends and be able to like you typically go out with the same people.
Yeah.
And it was like so you could set up a group for that, and then you just had the same preferences and had 24 hours of change. And when that happened, I just kind of went back to the drawing board, went and did some like product market research, all that. There was a company in I think New York that they had raised like $4.5 million, and they had exactly what my users wanted. And I'm like, I could go chase their tail, or I could close down, or I could pivot this and that. And then I'm running like all the numbers on the unit economics. And this was something that my co-founder I had, he kept telling me time and time again, like, this math isn't going to work out. Like, there's no way unless we get a huge investment and everything from like a VC firm who's willing just to like throw money away. There's no way this is going to work. And so when I was looking at this pivot, I came to that same conclusion that he came to with the old business model. And that's when I ultimately decided that it was like enough was enough, and it was time to kind of close things up at that point.
Yeah. So you close stuff down, and then what happens after that?
Yeah. So I moved so at the time I was in Kansas City. Moved from Kansas City back here to St. Louis. Moved in with my mom and dad, recently engaged. So went from having our own place to now my fiance and I are like bunking up with my parents. We actually didn't even have enough money to pay for our U-Haul to get back. So we had to sell like our lawnmower, couches, a couple different things just to be able to have the money for the U-Haul, the first month's rent on our unit for all of our other crap went, and gas to get out here. And I took a job working for a company here in St. Louis called 1904 Labs, and basically was doing business development for them, calling VPs of software engineering and all that with like MasterCard, Bear Crop Science, like that kind of thing. I loved the company. I hated the job because I'm not somebody who likes doing cold calling and all that stuff. And so I did that for about 6 months, and I was going through this mode, that poor me attitude, like, this happened. How much in credit card debt from the business, all these things. And as that's happening, all of a sudden I'm getting a bunch of people reaching out to me. They're like, hey, I need a website bill. Hey, I need a website bill. And that was something that people just always knew I did on the side.
Yeah.
And then that kind of snowballed into, you also do marketing. You also do marketing. And then, so that was September of 22. By April 1st of 23, I guess 2 weeks before that, my wife looked at me and she was like, you look like a walking zombie. You hate what you're doing.
Yeah.
How much have you been making with that side hustle, doing the websites? Obviously, we don't have the money because we just bought a house. We just paid off our credit card debt, all that stuff. I didn't have a car at that point because I had sold my car to pay for her engagement ring. And we basically figured out that I was making like my base. I think at the time the company brought in like not even half of what my base was at that company before commission and all that. And, she's like, all right, you're going to put in your 2 weeks tomorrow, and April 1st, you're going full time. And I'm like, I am. So that's kind of how I, quickly went back into being an entrepreneur from the last business, folding at that point. We had made some risk thinking that she was secure with her job. She was on a government contract, as you know, when I was going through a different coaching program with you. Like she got laid off middle of June. That kind of threw things for a wrench. It was like 90 days out from us getting married and all that. But looking back, wouldn't change the process for the world. So.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like I said in the intro, it's like you've went through a lot in a relatively short period of time,
Yeah.
albeit a couple of years, and like at every corner, like you've dealt with certain things. It would have been so much easier to just be like, "Hey, I'm shutting this down again. I'm going back, and I'm going back to just freaking working for somebody
Yep.
else, and just living that through." But you haven't, man, and you're taking action. And you're doing all those things. So talk to us, about Screamin' Cow marketing and kind of like as things have taken off over the last, almost year now since you went full time.
Yeah. So I went into it like kind of like I don't know who I'm going to work with. Like I just want to basically. My wife told me to quit my job and go on full time in this.
Yeah.
And so over time, over the last year, I've really, as I've been working with a bunch of different clients, realized like the clients that I love to work with are primarily like your home service businesses. When I was freelancing with the last business, I didn't take a paycheck. So I was freelancing to kind of keep the lights on and everything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I kept going back to like who I was working with within, and it was always the home service clients
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times in those fields, they go into those fields because they love doing the trade
Mm-hmm.
and don't necessarily know how to run a business. And so I love being kind of that mentor and guidance and everything like that. So I went from working with a bunch of like biotech companies. I tried a bunch of like startups and everything, and as you know, with probably a few that you've worked with, like they don't always work out the right way, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately pivoted into now like that's primarily who I work with. I'll dabble with a few like if you're like professional services, accountants, and personal injury lawyers, that kind of thing. But that's really who we work with. When I made that jump from basically working full time to running the agency, one of the clauses I guess I'd say that my wife gave me was like, you're not gonna be doing all the work yourself, and you're gonna hire people to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like I think I hired somebody on, she got laid off, she accepted a job, I hired on my VA, and it was like the moment that I could basically um, spend the next penny
Mm-hmm.
on like hiring somebody else to help build faster and faster and
Mm-hmm.
faster. That's what I did, and so that's probably what I'd say has helped me get from like nothing to something in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I think that's like a recurring theme of the businesses that have exponential growth in very, very short periods of time is as the entrepreneur, as the individual, the CEO, you can't do all of that stuff.
Hmm.
And that's where so many people get stuck in the process is they do try to be everything,
Yeah.
right? And even at scale, it can work out. I've seen it work out. I've seen it work out in my own companies where um wherever aspect, right? If you grow a multi-million-dollar agency and you're the person that is represented 90% of the lead generation,
Yeah.
it sucks, right? And so by building a team and doing it from the get-go, you're setting yourself up for that long-term success to not have some of the pain and aches that a lot of people do. And so what all, typical services do you guys usually offer your clients?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I began in the website development world. So do that. But now what we're actually doing, so I have a full team who handles like everything from like the SEO, running Google ads. We do a little bit of Facebook ads, although we try to like shy away from those unless it's a big client.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what we're doing now is actually bundling the cost of those sites into the ongoing plan. When I was building sites, it was like I'd have somebody come to me and to build a really nice looking site that's optimized for SEO, has all the pages you need. It's anywhere beginning for some people, it's between 5 and 10 grand, depending on
Yeah.
the agency you work with. Or you can find a freelancer, somebody to do it super cheap, but to get something quality, that's where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
And then you are expecting somebody to then spend, anywhere between, depending on the agency you're working with, 1,500 to 7, 8, 10 grand a month, depending on your business and what kind of growth plans you have.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, so we decided, like, you know what, let's just bundle that in and break it up over payments, like we do with their marketing plan. And so that's a recent change we've made, which has been awesome because now we're not going into a agreement with a client like that. It's just kind of like a one and done deal that we're just building their site and they're going to hope they get leads out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually doing all the ongoing marketing and everything as well. So we're really partnering for success and everything.
Love it. We'll make sure here at the end, because we want to dive in a couple more things, obviously, but we'll make sure at the end that way people can get in touch with you and have a conversation, because I know the good work that you do. I know as the agency owner and being an agency owner myself in previous life, knowing how much you guys take into consideration what you do. So definitely have my stamp of approval on Brad and his team over at Screamin Cow Marketing Group.
I appreciate it.
So the one thing I want to, and we were kind of talking, laughing back and forth about some of the branding you've been doing. So let's talk first about the business brand, and then we'll end it with the brand on the personal side, because obviously we've been working together on some of that stuff. But talk to us about, like, I know you mentioned it was your aunt's company at one point. How did that all take to fruition? And then some of the things you've been doing with the billboard, with the letters, and just your posting, I think is a great resource for us to be able to dive into.
So I'll keep it short on kind of how the brand came about. So it was my aunt's company years ago. She lives in South Florida, loves Disney. So she wanted something that was like a Disney character, that kind of stuff, but couldn't just be like, um, cow marketing. Like it had to have some sort of like action to it. And so she's going through all these different things, and there's actually a software that a lot of agencies use called Screamin Frog, and she, just all, and so that's kind of how it came about.
Okay.
Her partner at the time actually was like, I think he was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Well, she was like, no, like I love this idea. So that's what she wound up going with the branding. She worked a lot of like corporate companies at the time, and she did a lot of branding. And so she has a disease called Gaucher's, and so when I was freelancing doing work for her throughout high school and everything, by my senior year, she was like, I can't do this anymore. She had to close down the business, and just couldn't run anymore. And at the time, she had a couple clients, kind of just like transitioned out. And I was more interested in trying to go off to college and all that stuff. And so at the time, she said, the branding's there for you. If you ever want to do something with it, great. If not, so when I was freelancing, I kind of operated under it. But it wasn't until last year when I was like, I'm going all in on this. And so I've really just kind of like used it to my advantage and everything. So with the cows and everything, like we say, like milk your marketing potential, milk more leads, utterly unforgettable marketing experiences, like different things like that. And I do a lot of in-person networking. And so for what a lot of people that are listening probably can't tell, but I have a slight stutter. And so one of the things that helps me is like if I just like joke or amp up beforehand or whatever, like it helps it kind of like roll off the tongue a little bit more. So I get up and I just go like moo, and I like and it's like a bunch of like 40 people, and they're like, what's this guy doing mooing? And then I get up there and I'm like, oh, business name, we're utterly unforgettable marketing. And they're like, okay, and they get it. And so now that's actually translated into the personal branding as well, because I like you go to in-person networking events. The old way is like you would take somebody's business card, you put their email in your CRM, enroll in your email list, that kind of stuff. I do all that. But like I'll go and I was just a guest at a BNI meeting, and I'm like adding every single person that's on that list, that piece of paper, as a friend on Facebook, and I go to LinkedIn, because that's where I do all my content. And so now what's happening is some of those things that are happening in person are now circulated online. And then when I'm going back in person, I mentioned you beforehand, like my wife made a comment about buying a Highland cow because it'd be like a marketing expense and a tax write-off. And I'm like, no, like we're not doing that. But I'm like, let me just post on Facebook, see what kind of traction it gets. But now when I'm doing in-person networking, that's what people remember. They're like, so did you buy the cow yet? And I'm like, no, I haven't bought the cow. But yes, so that's really how all the branding's taking place and everything like that. Actually, the point now where I'm about to get like a full like cow print suit. So when I show up to these in-person networking things, like you're just gonna see me in a cow suit. I actually thought about getting it in time to show up here today with it. So
that would have been good. Yeah, that'll be memorable, man. And so you kind of touched on how it's like playing off into the personal brand, just because people are seeing you. You're editing, going through a lot of the strategies that we teach in Builders of Authority. What would you say is like, and I know it might be hard to like pinpoint one thing, but what would you say is like, from how you remember when you were first getting started or not doing the personal branding stuff? So let's just say like even when you were freelancing, of like the ones and twos people like reaching out to you. What would you say is like the biggest differentiation to how you're having conversations, because you've built the personal brand, because you've leveraged, the cow stuff and things like that, versus what you were doing before?
I think the biggest thing is back then it was always a sales conversation to me.
Mhm.
When I was meeting with somebody, it was like they were interested, and I always like had to have that like that ask in terms of like, do you guys want to sign a deal? Kind of like put a proposal in front of them and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Versus now, like, and to be honest, I got this from you, like just providing value to people up front. And so that's what a lot of what I'm doing, my posting online. Even when I was doing the job I had with 1904 Labs, like I was trying to do content with there, but it was the way the content was very salesy in a way because I
Mhm.
was just trying to close the deal, trying to close a deal.
Mhm.
And I've realized over time that like it's not always about that, like just providing value to people. I talk with people like it's getting to the point now where I heard you talk the other day of like, it's crazy getting all these messages in your inbox and you're like, how do I even like handle it?
Mhm.
And so like I'm taking some of those conversations like, hey, I got 15 minutes, I got 20 minutes, but just 15, 20 minutes, I can have a conversation with somebody who owns a coffee shop who's not my ideal client and give her enough value that she's like, my whole world has changed in 15, 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And I feel better about that than I do about closing a deal worth X amount of dollars because now know that the deals are going to come
Yeah.
as long as I'm providing value first.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the biggest difference in me as a person, my company, all of that from going from freelancing to now primarily building the personal brand.
Mhm.
And I also have a appointment setter who like she's cold calling, setting appointments and everything. But I'm teaching her how to like implement some of like the personal branding within her calls in terms of like using our cow branding, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and also building value first on the call. So she's asking them things like, "Hey, have you tried this?" Like giving them feedback and advice, and it's like, "Hey, like," and she has this phrase. She's like, as you can tell, this is a cold call, but I'm not going to sit here and try to pressure you into an appointment.
Mhm.
If you feel like it's been worth your time talk with me today and you want to talk with our owner, like great, like I'd love to set up a call with him. But if not, like no big deal. I just hope you got value out of it. And we've actually been like this last week, we've set a couple appointments based off doing that way.
Mhm.
And it's probably because people are enjoying the fact that like you're not calling to sell, sell, sell. You're like, hey, how much value can I give you over the phone? And if you want to do something great, if not, no big deal. I just hope you got value out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think, and you'll experience as you continue to grow, and like when you're still trying to grow and you're still trying to like make, an agency worth what you want it to
Yeah.
be. There's always going to be that place of like, man, I really need to close this deal because that
Hmm.
next deal or those next two deals unlock me to do X, Y, and Z. But you start to begin to operate from this mindset, and we've kind of talked about it before. When you have the personal branding and you know that you have more weight in the market versus just, hey, I'm one of the other hundreds of thousands of agencies,
Yeah.
people start to look at you as Brad,
Hmm.
and it takes some of that the pressure never goes away on a sales call,
Yeah.
but it takes some of that pressure of like, I have to close this deal to, if this is a good fit and I can help that person and they see the value, the deal will close itself.
Yep.
It might not close itself on this call, but they will come back at some
Yeah.
point. And sometimes it's them having to go with another agency because they were cheaper or quicker
Right.
or whatever, and they realized that, hey, I should have went with Brad
Yep.
in the first place. So I think that's one thing that I saw, and I'm kind of starting to see some of that stuff in you.
Right.
And when you operate from that place, it's an exchange of whatever you want to call it. Energy,
Yeah.
probably the easiest thing is, and people start to see that and they're like,
Right.
okay, this isn't a sales call. This is a value driven
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like what I do, like I met with a guy yesterday who owns like a pest control company here in St. Louis, and he's built his entire business based off referrals and networking. So
Mm,
trying to get somebody like that to understand the value of digital marketing,
yeah.
especially for a pest control company, when you have a very low like cost of entry up front, but the lifetime value of that client, could be 5, 6, 7 grand, depending on how long they're with you and how well your customer experience is and everything. But there's pieces of that conversation that I'm like, I know there's a crap ton of other people who have the same concerns here. And so
Mm,
now I'm like, okay, I need to cycle this in my content and everything.
yeah.
But I'm friends with him on Facebook as well.
Mm,
So now as I produce some of that content and output and everything, hopefully he's going to be seeing as me nurturing him. But
mm,
at the very least, I know there's other people out there. And hopefully I'm just like providing them enough value where they realize like, yeah, it may make sense. Like a roofing company makes 6, 10, 15, 20 grand off a roof up front,
mm,
but they don't have to replace their roof for like people don't have to replace their roofs for what, 10, 15 years, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending if there's weather and all that.
mm.
So they have to think, when I get this one client, I now have to wait 15 years before I get this client again. Versus a pest control company, yeah, it might only be $175, $200 you get for that first appointment. But if you're then making 80, 90, $100 a quarter off of the quarterly treatment you do, and they're a client for 7, 8, 9 years, your lifetime value winds up being the same as a roofing company. It's just you have more of that residual recurring income versus a roofing company doesn't. So, and those are things that I was talking with him yesterday, and I could just see in his face, like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I never thought of it in that way. And as long as I left that conversation with him feeling like he received something and his way of thinking was challenged in a way, that's all that's important to me.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome, man. Good stuff. Well, man, I'm really glad we had this conversation today. I know you'll kind of share some tidbits about like where people can stay connected with you and things like that. But before we, end everything out, what are you most excited about moving forward with the company, with your personal brand? Like, what's the future hold?
I'm just excited for the growth. Like, it's been, I really love people. Like, our core values for the company are based off the word people. And we use automations, all kinds of things to really enhance and elevate the customer experience. But it's like, I couldn't do what I'm doing if it wasn't for my team and it wasn't for my clients. Like, people are involved in everything. And when I get a message last week from my lead developer that he's like, hey, I need tomorrow off because most of my team is in the Philippines. And he's like, my wife and I finally got an appointment to get IVF, which I've been told now that the only reason why he's able to afford IVF is because of me and employing him and everything, because I pay them a little bit more than what most people pay developers in the Philippines for. And it's like, that is just another thing. Like, when we talk about our why, my wife, our dogs, we eventually want to have kids, like those types of things. But you add that in on top of there, and it's like, I wake up every day knowing that, like, if I don't keep the growth in terms of the company going, he's not going to have that opportunity. I have my VA. She's in college full time, and she works for me full time. Part of what I pay her is paying her tuition and everything. And it's like, if I'm not moving forward, like, they're not moving forward. And so that's what I'm most excited for. Like, my team has grown since I began, like, April 1st of last year. And I'm kind of like anxious on my seat of like, how big can I grow this team this year? Because it's like, how much more opportunity can I give people? But then I even just, like, right before I hopped in here, I got off the phone with a client who owns like a custom homes company. He does like pole barns, that kind of stuff in Kansas. And just hearing what he's going through with his current marketing agency, and just knowing that, like, I'm going to give him I worked at T-Mobile for a long time. We called it like the magenta glove moment there. So I'm going to call it like the elevated cow moment or whatever for us. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but just giving more people that elevated experience that they deserve working with an agency is what I'm most excited for.
Love it, man. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and where can people stay connected with you online?
Yeah, I'm online everywhere. I think we just recently changed all my handles to Brad Starnes Official. You can also go to bradstarnes.fyi rather than .com, and that has like a link tree type thing, has all of my social on there, ways to get in touch, everything like that. You can email me through it, anything like that.
Yeah, and sorry, did you share where Screamin Cow?
Yes.
They can find those
Screamingcow.com is going to be the best way to get in touch on there. And then also with our podcast, you go to the unfairadvantagepodcast.com.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely check out the podcast. Check out my episode where I was a guest on Brad's podcast. And if you're a business owner, definitely have a conversation with Brad. Again, I mentioned it before, but I know the work that he's doing. My stamp of approval, an incredible freaking dude. He cares about his clients and he cares about people, as he just mentioned. So, Brad, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely.
And make sure, if you're listening to today's episode, leave us a 5-star review. We are making a big push this year on reviews. It moves the needle. It helps more people just like yourself and those that are similar to you. Get connected with us at the Builders of Authority podcast. Learn from people like our guests like Brad. And remember, authority isn't built overnight. It's built over time.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We sure do appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. This way you'll get notifications as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. We sure do appreciate it. Until next time, friends.